وعلى أهل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين. صلى الله وسلم عليك يا سيدي ويا مولاي يا رسول الله. صلى الله وسلم عليك يا سيدي ويا مولاي يا أبا عبد الله، يا غريب يا مظلوم كربلاء، يا ليتنا كنا معكم سادتي فنفوز فوزا عظيما. قال الله تعالى في محكم كتابه الكريم: أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم، بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. ويطعمون الطعام على حبه مسكينا ويتيما وأسيرا، إنما نطعمكم لوجه الله لا نريد منكم جزاء ولا شكورا. God states in the Quran, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, and they give food out of love for God to the indigent, the orphan, and the captive. We feed you only for the face of God. We do not desire any recompense or thanks from you. Amanna billah, sadaqallahu al-aliyyul azim. Let us enliven our hearts and minds in gathering with the remembrance of the Holy Prophet and his purified progeny. Sallu ala Muhammadin wa ali Muhammad. This pandemic that we're all experiencing and seeing in the world, COVID, has put clearly on display some of the most extreme forms of greed and selfishness and self-interests. We found that despite the very large to COVID-19, I believe the number is close to 180,000 now, almost 180,000. Despite knowing this, we find that many people, they choose not to abide by safety regulations. We probably saw all on the news, and we probably have seen outside in public and in society, people who, for instance, they choose not to wear a mask, despite, in many states, despite being a state order that everyone, when they go out in public, in shared public spaces, that they should cover their nose and mouth with a face covering, yet some people choose not to observe this. Some people go out and they decide that they want to mix with others, and they will protest their right not to wear a mask, their right, to breathe oxygen, as it were. We saw in some places across the nation some people who went out protesting their right to go to the barber and get a haircut early on. And so we find that many people, despite the risks out there, they decide not to abide by safety regulations, thus putting not only themselves but others at risk. This is a form of selfish behavior, where we do not care for the safety and the health of others around us. When it comes to many of the corporations, the business corporations, we find that some of them during the past few months, since the beginning of this pandemic, some of them have made mind-boggling profits. We've probably read in the news and heard about certain CEOs and individuals who in a matter of a day or hours, they've made mind-boggling number in profits. That they did not even make those profits before the pandemic. But during the pandemic, they've made these profits, while on the other hand, there are many people who are struggling with their basics. Struggling with the basics. Look, the unemployment numbers. The unemployment numbers in the past few months, again, just here in the United States, it went up to almost 15% of the population were unemployed, and then it went down a little bit. But numbers that we have not seen in decades. Yet still, there are some companies, some corporations, some individuals who made staggering amounts of profits, while others were suffering and struggling with their basic needs and necessities. But greed and self-interest and selfishness, it's not something new, brothers and sisters. It didn't just appear with the pandemic. Yes, it became clear in many instances. It became clearer, but it's not something new. Look at the state of the world today when it comes to poverty. Look at official statistics on poverty. We are told that out of the 7.5 billion people on earth, approximately 2/3 or 5 billion live on less than $10 a day. 5 billion people, they live on less than $10 a day. And that almost 1 billion people in the world, they live on less than $2 a day. 1 billion people. That's about 3 times the population of our country. Imagine 3 times the population of the United States live on less than $2 a day. While you have those who live and who are making millions and tens of millions and hundreds of millions by the second and by the minute. When it comes to poverty and, for instance, malnutrition, UNICEF tells us that on average, about 3.1 million children die every year because of undernutrition. If we were to average that out, it would be about 8,500 children every single day around the world who die because of malnutrition, because they don't have enough to eat, or they don't have food that is healthy enough to eat. Children, and many of them, these are invisible deaths, brothers and sisters. Again, these are official statistics. There could be many more who die invisibly, away from the eyes and the ears and the knowledge of the world, the rest of the world. Look at consumption, energy consumption. Here in the United States, the United States makes up 5% of the world's population, but we use about 25% of the world's resources and energy. 5% of the world's population uses 25% of the world's energy. When it comes to wasting food, according to some statistics, on average in the United States, Americans waste almost 80 billion pounds of food every year. 80 billion pounds of food go to waste. It's not that it's consumed, it's wasted. So selfishness, greed, self-interest is not something new. It's there in the world. It's all around us. And part of this, in part, is due to this me-first outlook that many people have, or me-only outlook that many people have, this kind of individualistic outlook. that as long as I am comfortable and I am happy and I am safe and I am secure and I am doing well, it doesn't matter what's happening to the world around me. And I'm ready to get ahead even at the expense of others, and especially at the expense of others. And the Quran, sometimes it refers to this kind of selfishness that human beings are capable of, have the potential to, and in fact, many times, as we see in the world today, they in fact exhibit actively. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us in the Quran, He says, إِنَّ الْإِنسَانَ خُلِقَ هَلُوعًا, that the human being has been created anxious. Halu'a means he's anxious. إِذَا مَسَّهُ الشَّرُّ جَزُوعًا, when evil befalls him, he becomes irritated. As soon as he or she feels difficulty, challenges in this life or evil, they become uncomfortable, they become irritated. وَإِذَا مَسَّهُ الْخَيْرُ مَنُوعًا, but on the other hand, when goodness befalls him, when fortune befalls the human being, him or her, he or she becomes what? Becomes one who is reluctant to help others. Manu'a means he or she is reluctant to assist others, to come to the aid of others, despite being in a good position. This is how many human beings are. And what's worse, brothers and sisters, for us, especially as Muslims, as observant Muslims, what's worse is when this selfishness is colored with religious justifications and religious excuses. Again, the Quran gives us an example. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in Surah Yasin, He says, وَإِذَا قِيلَ لَهُمْ أَنْفِقُوا مِمَّا رَزَقَكُمُ اللَّهُ قال الذين كفروا للذين آمنوا أنطعم من لو يشاء الله أطعمه. When they are told, give from that which God has given you, God has bestowed upon you wealth, prosperity, give from that to others, those who are in need. They say what? They say, should we feed the one whom if God wanted to feed him or her, God would have fed them. But God wants them to be poor. So why do we have to take care? If God is not taking care of them, why should I take care of them? It's given a religious justification, a theological justification. It's not my fault, it's God's fault. And we find this sometimes in our own lives, right? We come across someone who's in need, someone who's poor on the street. We may consider helping them, assisting them, but sometimes we make up a justification, a religious justification. Oh, for sure, if I help him, for sure he's going to go and buy alcohol. 100, 1,000%. He's going to go and buy alcohol with this. And so I make up justifications not to assist others, not to express generosity, to continue promoting my self-interest and to be selfish. So this is what we see. But on the other hand, we also see that there are some individuals who have been bestowed with this capacity of empathy towards others, of concern for the plight and the situation of others around them, to express generosity of spirit. We see many people who are generous in their spirits, who have empathy towards others. I remember reading a story, and we find this in particular with children, subhanallah. I remember reading a story once about a teacher. The teacher is telling this story. She says that she was a resource room teacher, and that basically her job was to teach children with special needs with educational needs, to give them more time and instruction and to help them so that they can get on with their education. This is her job. She's a resource room teacher. She says that one day a child began to attend my classes and continued to attend the classes. The child was about 10 years old. So she says, I was instructing this child, I was helping him, but I noticed that he was doing very well. He was passing all of his tests, he was learning quickly, he didn't seem to have any problems. And so I said to myself, I have to figure out what is wrong with this child. The rest of the students, they all have special needs. They have learning disabilities. So I have to figure out what's wrong with this child. So she says, I tried to figure out, but I didn't. I was not able. And so I came to the conclusion that there's nothing wrong with this child. This child has no educational, impairments or needs. And so she says, one day I got a little frustrated and I took the child to the side and I told him, listen, why do you keep coming to this class? You're wasting your time, you're wasting my time, you're wasting your parents' money, hard-earned money. So why do you don't need to be here. The child, he replies to her, he says, I'll tell you why I'm here, but you have to promise that you won't tell anyone. She says, yes, tell me. He says, a while back, one of my friends in my class, the teacher figured out that he had a learning disability. And she told him that he needs to go and to take these remedial classes, to go to the resource room and take remedial classes. And so my friend was so embarrassed to be singled out as someone who has a learning disability and to have to go and take these remedial classes. He was so embarrassed. So I stood up and I told my friend, hey, it's no big deal. I take remedial classes as well. And since that day, because of my friend, I've been attending my classes, so my friend does not feel singled out or left out. Some people, God gives them this capacity to feel empathy towards others. Many times we read of children especially, even sometimes older children, youth and others, who, for example, their friends, God forbid, their friend is diagnosed with cancer, and the child begins, they're taking therapy and their hair begins to fall out. And for a child, this is difficult. To go to school, for instance, in this situation, or to be around others in public in this situation. How many times have we heard of stories of their friends, their children also shaving their heads in solidarity with their friends? This is a sign of empathy. This is a sign of concern for others around us. This is a type of generosity of heart and generosity of spirit and generosity of soul. And today, even in our times today, I mentioned COVID-19, it revealed to us a lot of greed, but it also revealed to us a lot of generosity of will. Look at our medical professionals. Look at the medical professionals in today's time, in today's moment, who risk their lives. They're actually risking their lives. Their job was dangerous before. Physicians, nurses, paramedics, their jobs were very difficult and stressful before, but now, with this environment of pandemic, they're actually risking their lives every single time they step into the office or the hospital or they go out in public. Why? Because they care for others. Because they want to help others. They want to assist others. This reveals generosity of spirit, generosity of heart. And so, we have to think about what it means to have empathy, brothers and sisters. And this is why our teachings, the Islamic teachings, they emphasize on developing selflessness. on developing compassion and care and empathy and concern for others around us, on not living our lives as though it is only us in this world and no one else, but that we live with a collective mindset and that we have concern and care for others around us, that we are generous with our time, we are generous with our resources, we are generous with our skills in helping and assisting others around us. And this is why one of the very important points that is brought up constantly, frequently in our Islamic teachings is what is known as qada'ul haja, or fulfilling the needs of others. Fulfilling the needs of others. There is great emphasis in our traditions on developing this kind of spirit where you look for opportunities to help others in any capacity that you can. In one hadith, Al-Imam al-Sadiq alayhi salam, and this point was brought up to our attention, of course, last night by our respected teacher, Samahat al-Sayyid al-Qazwini. He talked about the importance of fulfilling the needs of others. One hadith by Al-Imam al-Sadiq alayhi salam, he says, من قضى لأخيه المؤمن حاجة قضى الله له يوم القيامة 100,000 حاجة أولها الجنة. The one who sincerely fulfills the needs of others around him. They have a need and he assists in fulfilling that need. God will fulfill for that person 100,000 needs, the first of which is admittance to paradise. This is the hadith of Imam al-Sadiq alayhi salam. The ahadith, they tell us that fulfilling the needs of others, helping others, assisting others, being generous and kind to others is more valuable in the sight of God than the worship that we perform, the prayers and the fasting and the hajj that we perform. It's more valuable, it's more rewarding. It's mentioned in the hadith that one day Al-Imam al-Hasan alayhi salam, he was in the masjid, he was sitting in the masjid, and a man came to him. He entered the masjid and he told him, Yabna Rasulillah, I have a difficulty, a financial difficulty, and I need assistance. It's quite urgent. I need your help, I need your assistance. Al-Imam al-Hasan alayhi salam, he rose from the masjid. He got up so that he can go and help this person who is in need. One of his companions, Maymun ibn Mahran, he says, I told him, Yabna Rasulillah, did you forget that you are in the state of i'tikaf? For those who are unfamiliar, i'tikaf is an act of worship. It's not very prominent in many of our communities today, but it is an act, a recommended act of worship, that you stay in the masjid for 3 days and you engage in worship and you do not leave the masjid. You remain in the masjid for the entire period of time, engaged in worship. You take breaks to eat and rest a little bit, but you remain in the masjid. So the companion, he tells him, Yabna Rasulillah, did you forget that you are in the masjid and you are observing i'tikaf? Meaning you can't leave the masjid now. Al-Imam al-Hasan alayhi salam, he turned to him. He told him, yes, I did not forget. But I heard from my father, Amir al-Mu'mineen, relate from my grandfather, the Holy Prophet, peace be upon him, and his family, that when one person, when one fulfills the needs of his or her brothers or sisters, God will reward them for 9,000 years of worship. Worship in which one fasts every single day, spends every day fasting, and every night in prayer. This is the Imam. The Imam does not exaggerate. The Imam is giving us a lesson here that it's not just about self-promotion. When we engage in worship, what are we doing? We are building ourselves, our prayers, our fasting, our hajj. It's building our souls, our individual souls. We are building our spirits and our souls. It's not just about taking care of ourselves, not just physically, but even spiritually. Someone says, you know what? I don't spend a lot of money on myself. I don't consume a lot of food. But I work on my spirit, on my soul. So I spend a lot of time in worship. I spend a lot of time reciting the Quran, in prayer, in i'tikaf, in hajj. The lesson here is that it's not just about developing your own spirit and your own soul, but being responsive to the needs of others around you, helping others around you, contributing to your society, building your society in any way that you can. And thus the Imam says the reward is as though a person has been worshiping God for 9,000 years. And brothers and sisters, it's important for us to think about assisting others not only when we are asked. Because many times someone comes to us and says, I need assistance, and we try our best. But also when we are not asked, that we actually take the initiative. This is a whole other level of generosity, a whole other level of empathy. Because some people, they have honor, they have dignity, they may need help, they may need assistance, but they are embarrassed to ask for it. And so they may not ask for help and assistance. This is why it's important for us to reach out to others, to ask them, to tell them, how can I help you? What can I do? Is there anything that you need that I can assist you with? And I'm ready to help you. I'm ready to assist you. This is what it means to be generous with our time and with our resources and with our skills. The example of Ahlul Bayt is a primary example for us, brothers and sisters. All of them, no exception, all of the Ahlul Bayt, they were all selfless and altruistic. They all put the needs and the concerns of others before their own needs and their own concerns. Take the example of the Holy Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa alihi wa sallam. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad. We find that many traditions tell us that sometimes the Prophet, for 2 or 3 days, he would not eat. 2 or 3 days. He would not eat because any wealth, any money that he had, he would distribute to those who were in need. You know the ahadith, some of them, they say that sometimes the Prophet, he would take a stone and he would wrap it around his belly. He would place it on his belly and wrap it around because of the pain that he would feel out of hunger. Was the Prophet not able to go to the market and eat? He was. But his extreme care and concern and compassion for others, it prohibited him from putting his own needs before the needs of others. When he saw someone hungry, he could not eat himself if someone else was hungry. He could not. This is the Prophet. This is the legacy of the Prophet, brothers and sisters. Take the example of Fatima al-Zahra alayhi salam. We've all heard and memorized the story of Fatima who gives away her own wedding dress to the woman who is in need. She puts the care and concern of others. She doesn't say, this is my wedding day, this is the most important day of my life, this is my wedding dress, kada kada. No, she says, this lady is in need. She has no suitable clothing, so I give her my dress. The whole family, the Ahlul Bayt alayhim as-salam, their whole family was altruistic. We know the example from Surah Al-Insan, Surah Al-Dahr, that I began with the verses in the Quran, وَيُطْعِمُونَ الطَّعَامَ عَلَى حُبِّهِ مِسْكِينًا وَيَتِيمًا وَأَسِيرًا إِنَّمَا نُطْعِمُكُمْ لِوَجْهِ اللَّهِ لَا نُرِيدُ مِنْكُمْ جَزَاءً وَلَا شُكُورًا. We give you 3 days, brothers and sisters, they fast. And every day at the moment in which they want to break their fast, someone who is in need comes and they give him everything. And they break their fast on water. إنما نطعمكم لوجه الله. We give you for the sake of God. لا نريد منكم جزاء ولا شكورا. We're not expecting anything from you, not even a thanks. This is the spirit of empathy, selflessness, compassion, care, concern for others. This is what the Ahlul Bayt alayhim salam, they teach us. So the question that we have to ask ourselves is, how responsive am I to the needs of others around me? How responsive am I? Before the UN charters, before the development, relief foundations, non-profit organizations and agencies, before their development in the world, the Quran centuries ago tells us, it reminds us, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَفِي أَمْوَالِهِمْ حَقٌّ لِلسَّائِلِ وَالْمَحْرُومِ. In your wealth, there is a right. It's a right, meaning what? Meaning it does not belong to you, it belongs to others. حَقٌّ لِلسَّائِلِ وَالْمَحْرُومِ. The one who is in need. This is a right. Meaning what? Meaning that it is a right upon them, your responsibility, that you turn to others and you figure out who is in need and you contribute. You help fulfill those needs. You care for them. You express generosity towards them. Brothers and sisters, we're not expected to give everything that we have. Again, I mentioned when I spoke about the role of Ahlul Bayt and how they are role models for us, Amir al-Mu'mineen, he said very clearly, he said, most of you probably cannot live like me. There are some things that we cannot emulate the prophets and the imams and the Ahlul Bayt with. We're not expected to give everything that we have. But we are expected to do that which is in our capacity. The beautiful thing about our tradition, brothers and sisters, is that it does not belittle the small. Never. It does not consider what we call the small to be insignificant. Many of us, we often focus on the big. When you turn on the news, you read the newspaper, oftentimes the headlines, you'll hear about major contributions. Someone has given tens of millions of dollars, for instance, has contributed this large amount, has done this major project. We hear about sort of the big things. They make the headlines. Usually you don't hear about someone who's given $5 or $10. That doesn't make the headlines, right? Our focus is usually on the big. We are attracted to the big. But in many times it is the small, quote unquote, the small and the smallest that makes the greatest impact in our lives and in the lives of others around us. I read a story once about a king, a Muslim king, who decided that he wanted to build an enormous mosque in his capital. And so he proclaimed to the people, he told them, I have decided to build this enormous mosque, and I want to build it all by myself. I will take care of the entire construction of this mosque from A to Z, and I prohibit anyone from contributing. This entire project is my project. And so he goes about building this mosque, this grand mosque, and at the entrance of the mosque, he has a large sign that says that this mosque, the construction of this mosque, is sponsored by His Royal Highness King so-and-so, his name. Right? Khadimul Haramain. The king so-and-so is supervising and constructing this mosque. The sign is there, everyone is looking. We're told that one night the king goes to sleep and he sees a dream in which an angel descends to the mosque that he is building, and he erases the name of the king and he writes the name of a woman. So the king wakes up and he thinks about it. What's happening? So the next day he goes to sleep. The second night, once again he sees the same dream. The angel comes, erases his name and writes the name of that woman, the same woman again. The third day, the third night, for a third time he sees the same dream. He wakes up, he turns to his advisors and he tells them, this is the dream that I'm seeing. I want you to bring forth so-and-so. And he says her name. So-and-so, bring her forth. I need to speak to this woman. So they go out and they look for this woman and they find her and they tell her, listen, the king has summoned you. He wants to speak with you. She tells them, the king wants to speak with me? They say yes. She says, okay. She goes with them. She enters into the presence of the king. The king asks her, he tells her, do you know about the mosque project that I'm building? She says, yes. Says, do you know that I announced that no one can contribute to this mosque project at all? She says, yes. So he asks her, he says, did you contribute anything? She tells him, look at me. I'm an old, poor lady. I'm a poor lady, an old lady. What am I supposed to contribute? What do you expect me to contribute to the project? Tells her, are you sure? She says, yes, of course I'm sure. So he tells her, did you even get near the property? She tells him, well, there was this one time I was passing by the construction site and I noticed that one of the animals that is used to carry the heavy loads was tied to a pole, and this animal was very thirsty, and there was a bucket of water, but the animal, because it was tied to the pole with the rope, it was not able to reach the water. So I went and I carried the bucket of water and I placed it next to the animal so that the animal can drink. The king told her, yes, this is the reason. This is the reason. Now, because of your act, then I am pronouncing that my name be removed from the entrance of this masjid and your name be written. She told him, why? Why would you do that? He said, because when I intended to build the mosque, I intended to build the mosque for my own sake, for my self-interest, for my name recognition. But when you did this act out of devotion and sincerity. This is the intention behind your act, so you are much more deserving to have your name placed on this place of worship. Sallu ala Muhammadin wa ali Muhammad. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa sallam. So our teachings, they focus, they emphasize, brothers and sisters, that we develop compassion for others, that we develop a sense of care and concern for others, and that we never belittle an opportunity, we never ignore an opportunity to help others, no matter how small and insignificant it seems in our eyes. Never say no. Even if it's contributing with $1, $2, $5, Even if it's taking 1 minute of your time to listen to someone, even if it's giving someone one piece of advice, sharing a piece of knowledge, never ignore an opportunity to serve others, to help others, no matter how small it seems. Because while it seems small to you, in your eyes, it's never small in the eyes of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Look at the example of the Prophet, peace be upon him, and his family in his famous sermon. When the month of Ramadan arrived, the Prophet, he recited a famous sermon that in which he welcomed the month of Ramadan. You've probably heard it. He gives details about the beauty of the month of Ramadan and so on. And then he says a phrase, a very beautiful phrase. He encourages that people be generous in the month of Ramadan, that they feed one another, they help one another break their fast. He says, اتقوا النار ولو بشق تمرة. Save yourselves from punishment even with a piece of date. Even with a piece of date. Offer it to someone so that they can break their fast as a gesture of generosity, as a gesture of care and kindness to someone else. And then he says, اتقوا النار ولو بشربة من الماء. Protect yourselves even with a sip of water, offering a sip, not even a full glass, a sip of water. Because this act is an act of generosity. Because we all know, brothers and sisters, that when someone has been fasting all day, when they are hungry and when they are thirsty, even a small sip helps quench one's thirst. We feel it, right? After a long day we've been fasting, we're given, at the time of Maghrib, we take a sip of water and it quenches us, we feel it go down. If this is the case of someone who's been fasting only for the day, for a few hours, and this is how they are relieved when they drink water, what about the one who has no water for 3 days? What about those who are thirsty for 3 days, they have not had a drop of water? What would water do for them? In Karbala, there was a man who gave everything that he had so that he can go and quench the thirst of the children who were thirsty in the camp of Imam Hussein. This is Abbas. Abbas alayhi salam, he goes to his brother Hussein. He tells him, my dear brother, Aba Abdullah, my master, allow me to go out onto the battlefield and to fight these enemies. I have no patience anymore. Seeing the companions have been killed, other family members, his brothers, other nephews, others have been killed. He has no more patience. He tells him, allow me to go out and to fight onto the battlefield. Imam Hussein, he looks at his brother, he begins to weep. He tells him, but if you leave, who will be left to defend the women and the children? If you're gone, who will be with me? There will be no one left. Al-Abbas, he insists. He tells him, my dear master, allow me to go. Imam Hussein, reluctantly, before he gives him permission, he tells him, okay, but I have one favor to ask of you, Abbas. One favor, you know that the children and the women are thirsty. They have not had any water. I want you to go out to the river and to bring them some water to drink. Abbas, he turns courageously and valiantly. This is the son of Amir al-Mu'mineen. He rides out towards the river bank. The tradition says he is able to break the enemy lines. He goes out, he enters into the water. By the way, Abbas himself has not had a drop of water to drink too. He also is thirsty. He goes in, he places his hand in the water, he feels the water, then he remembers the children who were crying out, Al-Atash, Al-Atash. He remembers them crying out, we are thirsty. So Abbas, he throws the water back, he fills the water container, and then he turns back towards the camp. As he turns back towards the camp, Imam Hussein is watching from afar. Zainab is watching from afar. Abbas, how did Imam Hussein know where Abbas was? Abbas was standing, he was the standard bearer, he was holding the flag of the army of Abi Abdullah. So Imam Hussein would look at the flag and see where Al-Abbas is. Al-Abbas comes back towards the camp. The enemies, they begin to surround him. They are charged to surround him and attack him. Abbas cannot arrive with the water. He cannot bring it back. If he were to bring it back, then they would have strength once again, and this cannot happen. So they surround him. The traditions, they tell us that one of them comes and strikes him on his right hand, cutting his right hand. Abbas alayhi salam, he takes the water container with his left hand. He continues to proceed. Another enemy comes and strikes him on his left hand, cutting it off. We are told that Abbas, he takes the water container, he grabs it in his mouth. He is relentless. He wants to go back and make sure to deliver the water. As he is about to go, suddenly an arrow comes and it strikes him. It strikes him and it strikes the water bag and it causes him to fall. One of the enemies comes and he strikes Abbas on his head. He falls. As he falls, he calls out. He says, Assalamu alayka ya Aba Abdullah. Oh my brother, peace be upon you. Come to my rescue. I have fallen. Imam Hussein comes running towards his brother. As he comes close, he sees the hands of Abbas on the sand. He turns and suddenly sees the body of his brother there lying on the ground. He runs to him. He sees his brother. He tells him, Akhi al-an qad inkasara dhari wa qallat ayni. My brother, this sight has caused my back to be broken. I have lost my support. Al-Hussein comes down. He takes the head of his brother Abbas. He places it on his lap. He tells him, my dear Abbas, allow me to help you, to take you back to the campsite. Some traditions, they tell us that Abbas, he tells him, no, my brother Hussein, no. Leave me here, do not take me back. Al-Hussein tells him, why, my brother? He says, because I promised the children I would bring them water. How can I come back to them empty-handed without fulfilling my promise? Imam Hussein alayhi salam, he ends up leaving his brother. After moments, he is seen coming back to the campsite alone. Inna lillahi wa inna ilayhi raji'un. وسيعلم الذين ظلموا أي منقلب ينقلبون والعاقبة للمتقين. صلى الله وسلم عليك يا سيدي ويا مولاي يا أبا عبد الله وعلى الأرواح التي حلت بفنائك. عليكم مني جميعا سلام الله أبدا ما بقيت وبقي الليل والنهار. ولا جعله الله آخر العهد مني لزيارتكم. السلام على الحسين وعلى علي بن الحسين وعلى أولاد الحسين وعلى أصحاب الحسين. السلام عليكم جميعا ورحمة الله وبركاته. وإلى أرواح المؤمنين والمؤمنات نهدي جميعا ثواب سورة الفاتحة مع الصلوات.